I'm very fortunate to have Sid Bullens on the Slang of Ages podcast to talk about his fabulous new album, Little Pieces. Some of you may remember that I reviewed Sid's book, My Life as a Cosmic Rock Star, I guess maybe a month or two ago. And I need to mention how Sid came to my attention because Sid's been around for a while. Has had a wonderful musical career, but Sid, I didn't actually know about you till I talked to Deborah Holland last, I think it was November or December, and we talked about Animal Logic.
Uh,
And Deborah mentioned that you all are having it, you and Deborah and
Wendy Waldman.
Wendy
Yeah.
Waldman were
Hmm.
having California come out this year, which is an album of covers that the Refugees did. So I
Hmm.
had to grab all the Refugees albums. And I grabbed, of course, the new album as well. And I have been a tremendous fan ever since. So I've kind of been going down the rabbit hole of your career, checking out some of your wonderful solo releases. And then when this came up, when Little Pieces came up, I was just so pleased, not only because of your writing and your musicianship, but some of the guests you have on the album. And it is a wonderful album. So let's start there and talk about the genesis of the project for Little Pieces. I know you've been working at it for a while.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as some people know and some people don't, I used to be Cindy Bullens and now I'm Cidny Bullens. So I transitioned or started my transition back in 2011, 12. And that has to do with the new album, Little Pieces. And so the first song I wrote after I started my transition, somewhere in the first year or two, was the song "Little Pieces," and um, and then I wrote a couple more, Purgatory Road, and some
Right.
other titles on there, just a couple, but I really wasn't writing a lot because, as people may or may not know, when you decide to transition to another gender, it kind of consumes your life. And especially, not especially, but for me, having been an older person and having had a long life before, which I talk about in my book, as we'll go
Yes.
into, um, it was all consuming mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually, however you want to,
Mhm.
socially, culturally, all of the above. So I didn't write a lot, but then in 2018, um, I had done a film uh, with a director who subsequently put out a film called The Gender Line.
Yes. Wonderful short film.
Thank you. About my life, which, and the term "the gender line" came from my one person show, which I had written, which is a precursor to all this. So everything's kind of connected. I wrote that show in 2014 and 15, performed it around the country, was
Mhm.
called Somewhere Between Not an Ordinary Life. And I performed it around the country from 2014 through 16. And I know this is a long explanation,
No, no, no. Go right ahead.
but everything leads to something else. And so the director of this film, I was filmed in 2018, and he just said, you have to write a song called The Gender Line. And I looked at him. We were up in Maine on an island where I have a home. And I looked at him, and in my mind, I didn't say it to him. In my mind, I said, well, that's never going to happen, because my songs are basically love songs. They're basically about me and my experiences in life and
Mhm.
moments in my life, whatever. I don't write protest songs. I don't write cultural songs. I don't write songs on social issues. I don't, I'm not good at that. And so I thought, well, that's never going to happen. And then I was in my truck at that time, driving from Maine to New Mexico, where my soon to be wife was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, maybe we were already married. I can't remember, but we got married in 2018. So I was on my way there, and I looked in the rearview mirror and I said, if you were me, what would you do? You look in the mirror and you're not really you. And I always travel because I drive a lot as a musician and as someone with grandkids up in Maine, and I live in Nashville, and Wendy and Deborah are out in the West Coast. So I drive a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And I always have some kind of form of pad and paper with me. So I grabbed it and wrote that down. And by the time I got to New Mexico, I had the whole song, and not all the melody, but all of the lyrics, which doesn't happen often for me, but it did. And that spurred me on. Once I wrote the gender line and I knew it was a significant song for
Mm-hmm.
me,
Mm-hmm.
out of my lane in a bit, for in a not in a bit, in a way, but it really, when I write my own songs, I have to feel something. I have to be moved in some way by my own song, or it doesn't, you don't hear it.
Okay.
If you're not moved in a way, and sometimes maybe it's the beat and it's humorous, or it's, you know, ironical or whatever, or it's a love song, but I have to somehow get a physical reaction, emotional or physical reaction from one of my own songs,
Mm-hmm.
or it doesn't go anywhere. And I knew it was a good song. And then I really thought, okay, I have these few songs that I had written in early transition. I've written the gender line. I've got to make an album about my transition, about that's themed around this. And I will harken back to my album Somewhere Between Heaven and Earth, which was written after the death of my younger daughter.
And it is, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but that's
Yeah,
such a
please.
deeply emotional album and journey. And then your discussion in your book about the album, and also what happened in terms of your daughter, was just so riveting and moving.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a lifelong process to move on and live on after the death of a child. And I created those songs after her death and put them out not knowing, and that story's in the book too, and I won't go into it this minute, but what I'm trying to say is that was themed after the death of my daughter, Somewhere Between Heaven and Earth, that
Right.
album. And so I thought, okay, this is the other major uh subject of my life, really. And I'm going to theme it around my transition. And I think it's like Somewhere Between Heaven and Earth, even as I say, because and not that I tried to do this, but it was told to me after Somewhere Between Heaven and Earth came out that the album was universal as well as personal.
Yep. Absolutely.
And so I wanted this album to be that same thing. So it's the only real true song on Little Pieces that addresses being transgender is the gender line. There are some other line references here and there to aspects, but so that everyone can enjoy.
Right.
My task is to put out a good musical album. It's not to preach. It's not to be. Um, I'm not a teacher. I'm a storyteller. So if it educates, or if it creates an emotional response, or if it creates curiosity, even if the music itself can touch you in a way that spurs something else, that's great. If you want to listen to the album and just enjoy the music, that's great.
Right.
That's my wish, is that the music itself carries you, the listener, to a place where you weren't before. And however that does it is fine by me. If you're dancing to the song called Lucky for Me, which is a great rock and roll song, if you're dancing up in your living room to that song, that's a great response. You don't have to go into the deeper issues or the deeper meaning of any song.
Oh, when I listen to a song like Call Me by My Name, which
Yeah.
great rocker, great rockabilly feel, yet there is a message there. So you have
Mm-hmm.
this tremendous musicality and you have some lyrical relevance I think
Mm-hmm.
anyone can relate to. That's just a great example of it's not preachy at all. The album's not preachy, but it's a great journey.
Mm-hmm.
And then musically it's extremely strong. So Call Me About My Name is one of my favorites. Could you tell
Mm-hmm.
me favorites? Could you tell me a little bit about that song? That one featured, I'm not sure who was featured on that, but yeah, tell me about that.
Harry Stinson was the backup vocalist, who's a wonderful musician and singer
Mm-hmm.
in Nashville. Look him up. He's played with every famous person you can imagine. Um, yeah, Call Me by My Name. I knew it was, I had most of the other songs by that time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I hadn't been in the studio yet. We weren't in the studio, and I thought, I need, and I love that beat. I love the rockabilly, train beat. That
Mm-hmm.
just it just moves me. I love it. It's fun, and so I wanted a song with that kind of feel. And when you change your name, it takes, and I've had other friends change their names before me, before I even knew I was going to change mine, for various reasons, not related to gender necessarily, but some, a few. And it's hard to when you know somebody, to I mean, my siblings still sometimes, I was just with my sisters up in Massachusetts, and I say slip up, but I don't really care about it, and say Cindy, Cindy, blah 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 blah. And but mostly they don't, but sometimes they do. And it's hard to change. So it was really just more of the Call Me by My Name is more of a saying, like, not demanding that you call me by my name, but that you acknowledge me
Right.
as who I am today.
I am now. Mm-hmm.
And it turned out to be kind of the story. Somebody said in another interview that it was the cliff notes of TransElectric, my book,
Yeah,
and
that's exactly it.
I thought, oh, maybe this was just like last week or so. And I went, oh, that's very interesting take. It kind of is,
It is.
So
Yeah.
uh, so I wanted to write it started with the beat. It
Mhm.
started with the feel. I wanted a song with that feel. And and then it just, as my songs do, they, when they're right, when the time is right, they just kind of flow out of me once I get kind of a a thought on what I want it to be. And mostly, not always, but mostly. And so Call Me by My Name is just that. Acknowledge me for who I am today.
And that song harkened me back to reading your book and your conversation in the latter chapters about choosing your name
Mm-hmm.
and how you wanted to go through that process and how you wanted to be, I guess, not too different from your prior name,
Mm-hmm.
but something which you were comfortable with. So I love that song. I love the rockabilly feel. I do need to go back though because I cannot I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the gender line and the guest you had on. I think it was one of my favorite singer-songwriters,
Rodney Crowell.
Rodney Crowell.
Yeah.
Jeez. How did you get Rodney to get involved in the project?
Rodney and I have been friends for many years. He co-produced 3 tracks on the Somewhere Between Heaven and Earth album back in the 1997-98 with me. It didn't come out till 99, but it took a while to do that album, and you'll read about it in the book.
Mhm.
Um, and so Rodney's like, he's one of these people that's like an angel on earth, and he is for so many people. He just shows up. It's like he knows, or he feels, I guess, what's important to him, obviously, but it turns out to be important to the other person, obviously, and to the world. I mean, he is extraordinary. First of all, we all know he's extraordinarily talented as a songwriter and a producer
Yes.
and a musician and an artist. That's a given. But he's extraordinary as a human being. And he, as I talk about in the book, if it hadn't been for Rodney Crowell, I'm not sure Somewhere Between Heaven and Earth would have been the album that it is, even though there were a lot of other people involved in that album. And he only co-produced 3 tracks, and I had already recorded some of them myself, which are part of the album. But it was he who convinced me that I had to do that project as a whole album and not just kind of songs here and there. And he supported me in a way that I could not have supported myself, as did other people, which you will read about. And he has continued to do that throughout my career, and when I ask him, which I don't often, obviously, but when I ask him to participate in something that I'm doing, he says yes. I mean,
Wow.
he came and sang on that album, on that song, The Gender Line. When I was doing a book read, my very first book reading, when the day the book came out, my memoir came out on June 6th of this year, he was on the road, and I asked him very late, because I wasn't sure how I was going to do this reading at Ann Patchett's bookstore, Parnassus, wonderful bookstore here in Nashville. I asked him very late if he could kind of come and help me, because it was my first one. I'd never done it, and I'd never done a book reading or event. It was the day of the release. My publisher was coming down from Chicago. I was, I knew a lot of my friends were coming, so I asked him very late, like only a few days before the event, if he could come. He was on the road and came back. And when he got back like the day before and did it.
Wow.
And showed up and was my moderator, my kind of person who we sat and asked me questions and stuff after I did my reading. That's the kind of person Rodney Crowell is. And, I will forever be indebted to him for what he's done in my life. And I know I'm not the only person who feels that way.
Sure. Well, let me ask about a few other tracks on the album. I guess my list of favorite tracks, and walking through this world, deeply personal, deeply emotional, and fits with the theme of what you're talking about and the theme of the album. How'd that come about?
As I alluded to back a few minutes ago, back in 2018, I knew I had to, in the fall of 2018, I knew I had to start writing. And so I had written The Gender Line, and then I started diving back into, and I'm not prolific like Bruce Springsteen or somebody like that. I'm not somebody who writes 50 songs a day, or, if you put me in a room with somebody, I can come up with a song, but by myself, and I mostly, not always, there's two co-writes on this album, Little Pieces, with Bethany Nelson Chapman and Ray Kennedy, but
Right.
mostly I'm a solo writer. And so in fall of 2018, anyway, I wrote the gender line, and I decided, and I knew I had to come up with some other stuff. So I started going through some old ideas that I had either put down on the computer, or I have notebooks. I'm going back and looking for, titles. I'm a titles person. So I go back and I look for any idea. It's a line, a title, and then a musical riff. So I went back into my like garage band Logic, things where I was just fiddling around with stuff. And I heard this track. I heard the track for Walking Through This World. And it was kind of this kind of old 70s, 80s, even 60s, kind of a retro track of this dump, da da da
A
da
great vibe.
da
Yeah.
da.
Yeah.
And all the string lines were there that you heard. All the arrangements are almost exactly like my little demo, but it was just a track. And so I'm listening to this track, and I swear to you, I just started talking. And I have never in my life done a spoken word track. I've never thought about it, never crossed my mind, never. As Cindy, I definitely would not have done that. But I just started talking, and it felt like almost like a Lou Reed kind of thing, and this retro kind of thing. And so I started coming up with all these titles after and so the first, as you people can tell who know the titles of these songs that I'm talking about that have the word walk or walking or walked or something in the title. And it just kind of came out like the gender line did in the truck, but the track was really what spurred the lyrics. And I just thought, wow, this is pretty cool. I've never done that before. And so that was that. And yeah, it is another kind of painting, splash of images, splashes of thoughts and so on about my transition. But it's a statement. It's a statement of, you can do whatever you want. You can walk on by. That's a great Dionne Warwick song, by the way. And you can do all these things, but I am walking through this world as exactly who I am.
Right.
And I'm very proud of that track. I smile when I listen to it because it makes me move, as well as knowing that it's a statement for everyone. For everyone. Everybody walks a little differently. Everybody's walking through the world a little differently. If we could only accept that.
Yeah.
If we could only accept our differences, and that's a whole nother story, but then we could all just be who we are.
I mean, it's an amazingly powerful affirmation of self-identity, of identity. And it's uplifting. And I really appreciate that. Next on my list is Crack the Sky.
Yeah, Crack the Sky is a little darker. It's a little darker in the sense of there are moments, there have been moments, and again, my book is very telling. It's very candid. It's very honest about what I've been through in my life, physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. And there are dark times, and there were times in my transition where I felt afraid for myself, about myself, not only from the outside but from the inside. And yet I knew that I had to move forward in, and that okay. So it's kind of like, you're sitting beside me, you don't know how I'm really feeling. You don't know that I feel, you know, not so much in danger, but that I feel differently, that I have some stuff going on. And this again is, you can be universal. We
Mhm.
all have our internal stuff that somebody else doesn't see,
Don't see it,
or
right?
and not to the fault of the other person. Just, we are who we are, and we go through what we go through.
Mhm.
And so my thing was, okay, I've got to navigate this and crack the sky, meaning, I've used that term a lot in my life. It's like, except that my term has always been, I'm cracking the universe,
Mm.
but that was too much. So it was crack the sky. I do use the word universe in the song, but so it's just getting that crack where you can go through it and not have any kind of limitation.
Mhm.
And of course, the sky, we look up and we don't see the limitation, but it's there somewhere.
Right, right.
So it's just a an examination, or a picture of someone who says, you know what, I have this going on and that going on,
Mm.
but I have to keep going. I have to keep navigating through this world, and maybe, just maybe, I can crack the sky.
And that's another, well, I mean, it all obviously ties into the book. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and we'll talk about the production in a little second, but it really all ties into my life as a cosmic rock star in terms of some of the adversity we've already talked about that you faced, that you've overcame or you're working through. And it really is inspirational for anyone, but
Mm.
particularly people going through very similar things. So yeah, thank you for that. All right, next on my list is Not With You.
Well, Not With You was written with wonderful singer songwriter artist Beth Nielsen Chapman, who's been a friend of mine and who is mentioned in the book.
Yes.
Um, has been a friend of mine for decades, and um, I asked her before we went into the studio if she would write a song with me, a duet, and she said, "Sure, we're friends." And so we went to her house, and I can't remember who kind of said, let's write a song about your relationship. It could have been me, it could have been her, or we both said, it probably was me, but who knows? She loves my wife Tanya, and uh, so that's what we did, and it really was, it's just a simple love song, kind of from a different angle of, you know, I don't want anything. Nothing's ever worked for me. Nothing has ever worked with me. And really, the idea is accept with you, but it's phrased, but not with you. With you, I can reach this.
Mhm.
I can have this love. With you, I can feel this way. And so Beth sat at the piano, and I sat at the guitar in her living room, or her music room, and we wrote that song. And she's awesome. She's just another. She's the
Right.
one who, going back to Rodney Crowell, I had met Rodney before, but she and he are very, very close, and he had produced her albums
Mhm.
back then. And she's the one who said, "You got to talk." Because I called her and said, "Do you think Rodney Crowell would?" This is back at Somewhere Between Heaven and Earth.
Right.
"Do you think Rodney Crowell would help me?" And she said, "Yes." She called him. So Beth has been an important person in my life, and continues to be a wonderful friend.
Wonderful.
There's a great video, by the way, of that song
Oh,
too.
I don't think I've seen that. I have to certainly link that to
Yeah.
the article. Thank you. Then my last one on my list is Healing the Break.
Hmm. Healing the Break was actually a song I had written before transition, and it's
Okay.
the only one that I had written before transition on the album. But I felt it belonged because it is about healing the break. First of all, it was inspired by a painting,
Hmm.
the title of a painting by a friend of mine in Maine. And so I wrote a song to her painting about healing the break. It was a different break for her than it was for me, but um and the break obviously is heartbreak or life break, whatever it is. And I felt that the song belonged on the album because whatever discord or heartbreak, as I said, or life issue that's causing any kind of disruption or hurt, anything that we go through,
Mhm.
it is all about healing it. Now, there are certain things that can't be healed. You can't heal from the death of a child. You can't heal from some of the horrors that we go through as people,
Mhm.
abuses that we go through as people. We all know that. There are things that we never will heal from. But the process of coming to terms with the way life is
Mhm.
in some kind of manner that we can live with personally. And some things, you know, we could talk about the world as it is today. I
Yeah.
don't know how people live with some of the stuff they go through, and they don't sometimes.
Right.
And I'm not someone who can preach about the best way to heal because I struggle. I struggle. That song says a part of me is broken. There's no doubt of that. But like
Right.
weeds in the sidewalk, life grows in the cracks, which means that as long as I'm alive, even if it's weeds that are growing,
Mhm.
as long as I'm alive and have some kind of will to move forward. And God knows I am one of the lucky ones who has a ton of support around me and love around me. There are so many who don't. And I'm not just talking about my transition. I suffer from depression. I've lost a child, but I am privileged in many, 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 many ways.
Mhm.
And part of that privilege is having people support me for who I am. And so I have so that song, and my daughter Reed sings on that song with me, and it was very important that my daughter be a part of it. She's actually been a part of all my albums
Yes.
since Somewhere Between Heaven and Earth.
Well,
And but I felt it was important to have her not just sing backup, but be a singular person on that song because we grow together
mhm.
in some respects as a family. Still her mother, even though I have a mustache. I always say that. And um, it's a powerful song, and I decided that it definitely needed to be on the album.
Oh, absolutely. Um, so talk a little bit about the timeline in terms of the production of the album. And I know you worked with Ray
Ray
Kennedy
Kennedy.
album. Um, you had your one person show.
Mm-hmm.
You had the short document, you have a short documentary, and you were collecting these songs over what time period?
Yeah. So, like I said earlier,
Both.
I wrote little pieces back in 2012 or 13. I'd have to look it up, maybe 14, but I think it
Mhm.
was probably 13 and 2013. So, yeah, it took me a long time to get to the point where I felt I could make an album. And we made this album. Ray Kennedy, who is one of the most incredibly talented producer engineers. He's also a wonderful musician and songwriter. He produced Lucinda Williams, all of Lucinda Williams' past, not all of her albums, but a lot of the past recent ones, plus Car Wheels on a Gravel Road.
Yeah.
He
Wow.
produced Steve Earle. He's produced Rodney Crowell. He's produced, the list goes on and on and on. And he's one of my dearest friends on earth.
Mm.
And um, sorry, I have this thing. Um, so we went into the studio in 2019
Mhm.
to record these songs, and we did. And then the pandemic came, and I pressed up some of the records and I put it out kind of from the backseat of my car in 2020.
Mm.
And but it wasn't released. I just thought, oh, I have these songs. It was the pandemic. I was trans. I knew I wasn't going to get any kind of action, or I felt that way at the time. And then I met Slim Moon from Kill Rock Stars in April at uh, a function at an event called Love Rising here in Nashville, which was in response to the drag queen bills and the school shootings and so on and so forth. And I was asked to be a part of that. And I met Slim, who is the founder and president of Kill Rock Stars Records. And he just said, I want to put out that record. And that's what happened. And here we are.
Oh,
So, yeah.
go ahead.
No, it's just, it's fantastic. It's, if you had told me a year ago that, or 2 years ago, I guess, that I would have a book and an album out at the same time, I would have told you were probably crazy. But, uh, I went through some dark times in the pandemic, like a lot of us did, and there were other reasons too. But I feel very fortunate to have the people around me who have allowed my story to come out and start to be told.
I know we're running out of time here, but
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a creative burst on your part because you've always been creative. If you look at your discography,
Yeah.
just that you've had a lot of projects in the last 12 months.
Yeah.
Before I let you go, I want to talk
Yeah.
about my life as a cosmic rock star. How
Yeah.
that, I guess it's a question, took a lot of time and effort to congeal into a project. I know it's your story, but from your upbringing through your transition, there is so much there we haven't even touched on in terms of some of the questions. How much time did that take, and how did you interweave that with the album?
So in the pandemic, I said, okay, maybe it's time to write my book. And I put together a book proposal. My wife is a memoir coach. Ironically, she didn't coach me, but she helped me kind of say, oh, you need to do this, you need to do that, you need to do this. And so I put together a book proposal in the winter of 2020 and got an agent in April of 2021 and got a book deal in August of 2021, and a publishing deal for the book. And so I started with the book proposal, writing the first chapters. And I'll try to keep this short, which is hard for me because I have so much stuff. But I had written the show, and the show proved, I knew the show was going to be the template for the book. The arc of my one-person show, Somewhere Between Not an Ordinary Life, was from my time where I arrived in Los Angeles to the present, which is at that time was 2016. Okay. And or 14 at the time, but and so I knew that that was a good template. I had written my show, which of course is dialogue as well as music, live music. So I had to put, it was actually hard to write the show because I had to put my life in 45 minutes of dialogue, and it was multimedia. So I had pictures and stuff and video and things too, which helped. So I had to learn. So I went from being a songwriter where you put the story in 4 or 5 minutes. You have to tell an entire story in 4 to 5 minutes. So being a songwriter helped me, but I actually, because I'm concise, but I had to expand my story with the show, and then I had to expand it again with the book. So the show helped me with the template, and I used it as a template. I also have been keeping journals for 50 years. And that really helped once I decided to go back and read the journals. There's a part in my epilogue where I say the journals were a blessing and a curse, and you can read that for yourself. And by the way, the name of my book is TransElectric, My Life as a Cosmic Rock Star, if people are looking for it. And so it was, so there's kind of several different answers to your question. Okay, so I had a lot of material with which to work, first of all. But I still didn't know, and I knew that the chapters were all going to be song titles, my songs. And so I had some things that I knew were going to frame the book. Songs and lyrics, the template from my show, which starting in 1973 and ending in the present, even though I knew I had to go back into my childhood. And once I started reading, and I knew the journals were going to be involved, because then I was going to be able to really get into some of the meat and truth of where I was at a particular time, even at 20 years old, at 25, at 35, at 45. Wherever I was, there was something in those journals that was going to help me be in the moment when I was writing the book, or clarify some memories that I couldn't quite get to, or create things in the book that I didn't remember, Sure. So I had those materials with which to work. And once I started doing it, it took me only 10 months to write the book. And I even asked for an extension. It was due in June 1st of 2021. I signed the thing in, 2022, excuse me. June 1st of 2022, it was due. I signed the contract of my publisher in August of 2021. And in March of 22, I asked for an extension because I thought, oh no, I'm not going to finish. And then I finished a month early.
Wow.
Because once I started. And then I also edited the book myself. And I'm not talking about the spelling and the things like that. That's called
great piece,
something else. But in terms of the way the book is, my publisher was the editor at my publisher was wonderful, because he said to me, because I would turn in chapters 2 or 3 at a time, and he just said, go for it, go for it, you've got it, go for it. And of course we had some discussions, but really they were minimal, and he said, this is your book, you write it the way you want it. And I did. And I'm very proud of it. It's candid, it's honest, it's I love to write, so I felt good writing it, even though it was very, very difficult to write some of the stuff that I wrote.
Sure.
I had to, and I didn't know when I would start. I mean, I didn't know where I was going. I mean, I had the arc, but I didn't know exactly what details were going to be in the book until I started writing a chapter. And then they just kind of came out, you know. So it's part of the creative process. I can't really explain it.
Well, if anyone watching this or listening to this hasn't gotten TransElectric, My Life as a Cosmic Rock Star, highly recommend it. It's available all your major online booksellers. It's available on Amazon, obviously. It's on
And the
Audible.
forward is by Sir Elton John.
Yes, Elton John.
So you got to put that in there.
I do have to put that in there. And the chapter about the tour with Elton John, the tours with Elton John.
Yeah.
Well, wow.
Yeah.
I mean, there's just so much from beginning to end in the book. I'm just glad that you had the time and you made the effort to put that into a book. I'm glad it's available as a book. I'm glad the Audible's available. It's just fantastic. And in my mind, Little Pieces is a perfect companion piece to your wonderful autobiography.
Thank
So I
you.
know I've taken up too much of your time. Is there
No,
anything else that you
no.
want to add?
No, I first of all, I appreciate this opportunity. I always appreciate the opportunity to let people know that I'm here. And so I thank you for having me. And no, I TransElectric, My Life as a Cosmic Rock Star. I will just say this, you know, I am a transgender person, but I lived a whole life. I lived decades and decades as a woman. And as Cidny Bullens, I sang on the Grease movie soundtrack. I did a lot of things. I had my own solo albums as Cindy. Obviously, we've talked about I've had got married, had children, lost a child, all of that stuff. And I transitioned late in life, and I hope that my story humanizes the uh, the experience of being transgender a little bit. And that's really what I hope, that it humanizes. You know, I am a human being. I lived a whole life. You know, I've lived several different lives if you read my book. And I remain exactly who I am, you know, that I was as Cidny Bullens, except my physical has changed, you know, and I'm still a mother. I'm a grandparent 4 times over, you know. I still do the things that I've done my whole life. I'm still a musician. So hopefully if my story can help humanize that and also tell a very unique story, you know, everybody has a unique story. Mine's pretty unique. And the music is a companion, because the music will hopefully lift you up and have you have a good time, as well as tell a story.
Oh, absolutely. And I'm glad that you could share your true, authentic self and TransElectric, My Life as a Cosmic Rock Star. It is a wonderful book.
Thank you.
I love the album. I know you've been on tour with the Refugees, because I know you had a few
Yeah.
dates. You had a date or two in Nashville, which I couldn't make. But when you're in my neighborhood, or you're in Nashville, since it's not too far from me, since I'm in Atlanta, I'm certainly going to stop by and see you. I really appreciate your artistry. The book and the album are amazing. And I really appreciate you taking the time for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Preston. I really appreciate it.
All right. Take care.